Everyone here, okay. Travis, you there?
Mr. Warren, handsome as always.
Good to see you again, even with the beard, mate. You still look a bit weird with the beard, but that's okay.
So she's been growing. She's getting there. I'm a little bit disappointed. Your camera's better than mine. I'm having a look at your resolution and it's stunning.
Oh, mate, what can I say? You were the guy who got my camera fixed up from a disaster, remember? 3 years ago?
Oh, it was it really 3 years ago?
Yeah, it was that long.
Wow. We're getting old, Warren.
Nah, you are, mate. I'm getting younger. I'm Benjamin
I've started going grey.
Button.
I'm gutted. So.
And here's the best looking of everyone. Stephen.
Only puffs wear beards.
Spoken like a person who can't grow one.
Why the fuck do I want to? They sum it in
Lazy. There's a band called The Beards, and they've got a song that says, "If your dad's got no beard, you've got two mums."
Oh dear.
Mate, where I grew up, if you had a beard, you got beat up and stabbed because you're a southern wanker.
But I am a southern wanker.
Fucking metrosexuals. Should fucking drowned.
Nothing politically correct about this. You know, we got Travis involved who came on. He's got the worst sense of humour. Came to our house. Just so you know, Stephen, about this guy. He turns up to video camera our sovereignty event 3 years ago. Says you're an amazing speaker, but your camera works shit. You need to fix it. Next minute, he turns up at my house and just starts installing cameras and all kinds of lighting. Then he says to me, "Oh, here's the bill." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, James and Ed approved it.
Yeah,
I'll blame them. They're not here.
But I must admit, mate, your camera, right? I can just about read the books on your bookshelf behind you. It is good.
It's very good. I have to admit, he did a good job, but he kind of, I felt like he was Mark McGowan. He just walked in and vaccinated me, or rather vaccinated my system. It was, it was
probably did. You're probably been recorded directly straight to, Dan's lair.
Oh, look, I'm sure. I got no rights or no freedoms. That's okay. As long as I get one or two.
I won't.
Dr. Bill loves you.
So when I first put it in, I think it was the first or second day you had it in there, and then you asked me to put it in your bedroom, and I said, "I'm not recording your rape dungeon."
Yeah, it's the sense of humor is quite shocking. I think I'm the.
By the way, that's not true. That never happened for the people listening. It's just I like embarrassing Warren.
Oh look, I'm probably I've got a dark sense of humor, and he makes me cringe anyway. So, well, Travis from Edge Radio, I mean, who actually does have a semi-normal kind of title, and he actually runs Edge Radio, which is meant to be awake, and he's been involved with One Nation, and he's a good interviewer. I'll give him that. It's about the only thing he can do well, apart from being
pretty well too.
But I will let you get started, Travis, and start hammering Stephen, and then I'll sit in the background and jump in if I feel I've got anything, and fire away, mate, about what's going on.
Hey, just quickly before you run, Warren, I don't know if I've told you not. Luan is nearly 6 months pregnant with a boy. So I do that pretty well too, by the looks of it.
You've told me that 4 times now, but is it
not? I haven't told Steve yet.
Yeah, you've told me about 3 times now.
So does that mean she's had 3 kids in the last 3 months, or what?
But it's yours?
Sorry, what?
I said, are you sure it's yours?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The amount it's dancing in the belly, it has to be mine. But, yeah, anyway. So we better get into this.
Because a friend of mine, he's not sure that it's his. We had this conversation today.
Oh, God.
DNA test.
DNA test 101.
I have to say, it's good to see Anne, Aiden, Josh, and Rach is here as well. And I saw Christine earlier as well. Jason, just to name a few. Noel.
Oh, are we live?
Oh, yeah. So Steve's just gone to hide all his beers.
Yeah, and other stuff. I've got to shut up my OnlyFans page.
I've got to get rid of all that contraband in the background.
Well, there's not that much contraband.
Oh, there's next to nothing. Hot cross buns is about the most contraband in this household.
I have to say, is this your actual place, though, Steve?
Yeah,
Or is
yeah.
it hotel?
No, this is a place that I've got a rental on. So
Okay. For those who might not have known since last time I was here, we're doing a series. I can't remember what it was called, but every week Steve was in a different hotel, and it was sort of like guess the hotel for Steve every time he came through. So I think this is the first time in 3 years I've actually seen one of your properties.
yes. This is one.
So yeah. So let's get into it. So the title for today's show, or tonight's show, depending where you're at, we actually want to talk about legally protecting your wealth. So I have to say, I think we've got two of the best speakers here. Warren's I'll be floating around in the background a bit. This gentleman, Warren, he set up our structures for us. They're insanely awesome. They're great, worth every penny that I paid for them. So I can't harp on enough about Warren in that regards. But the other one that really caught me by surprise, his level of knowledge, was actually Stephen Petith with us as well. So we're going to have like three main topics on what we're really going to focus on tonight. So the first one is asset protection, taxation, also continuously monitoring and adaptations, because what a lot of people lose track of is, especially as what we're saying with the legislation being ran through Parliament at the moment, legislation is constantly changing. So you have to constantly be coming back to it. So I'd like to start there, Steve. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Let's hit on the continuously monitoring and the adaptations for, especially around the asset protection side of things. So over to you.
Yeah, look, this is something that you should do on a regular basis. I do it yearly. Some people that we know of with family offices and that sort of stuff, they do it more regularly because they've got staff to do it. But you should. Look, at the most, I wouldn't let it go any more than 3 years before you actually did a full review. But 18 months, 2 years, probably for most people is okay. And it can be as simply as, are we dividing assets? So, for instance, a really good friend of mine, she's a great property investor, but she has what's called the rule of five. Right, so it's 5 properties or $5 million in assets in any one structure. All right, so, and then sometimes, property values go up, and then all of a sudden it might be, well, I've either got to revalue that structure, or I've got to take a property out of that structure, or I've got to restructure or do something like that. So, and that's asset protection, because she doesn't want any more than $5 million worth of her assets exposed to a lawsuit with someone falling downstairs or stubbing their toe, because we're getting more litigious in this country, right? It's amazing now, the bullshit lawsuits that have been brought by people just because they think you got money, and landlords. If you're a landlord out there, you're going to get attacked, and you're going to get attacked a lot in the years to come, because people, with this, the rich are going to get hold of the rich, right? They're going to, the people out there that have nothing are going to come after you, and they'll put a lawsuit on. So yes, you should be looking at your structures. You should be looking at how you've got your assets split and held. What banks you're using, right? We've seen bank failures around the world, right? You're looking at the banks, looking at your stock portfolios, your brokerage accounts, lawyers, anyone that you've got in your sphere, you should be reviewing, right? And you should be making notes on, I need to change this, I need to change that. So it could be as simple as you set up a trust to help with asset protection, but you didn't take any family breakup into mind, and the family court does pierce the veil of trust, and that has done to date. So maybe you need a slightly different structure to protect assets, so that you can't, for divorce or whatever, that sort of stuff. So yeah, you should be continually looking at what's going on. And this, sorry, and I'll go there. This is another reason why I say politics matters, right? Politicians make laws that really affect your life. And if you don't understand what they're doing and don't know where to find where they're pushing legislation through or what they're doing, you're at a disadvantage, because the wealthy do. The wealthy understand the game. They understand the laws. They know who their politicians are. They know who to talk to. They know, how to lobby and what's the best way of doing it if they need to. Sometimes the best way of lobbying is not doing it. It's just going out and starting the business or whatever. But you need to know the political landscape.
Yep. So one thing I'd love to add to that one as well, especially if you're looking to change or you're just looking to start structuring yourself properly, one thing I've noticed is it's really, really important to first know where you're starting from. Because what happens is, moving from one system into the next system, there's a lot of things that you're not going to pick up on. And if you don't know exactly where you sit, and this is where really, really high quality accountants come into play, real professionals, especially lawyers. If you're, say, for example, if you've got a house under your personal name and you're transferring it into your business name, obviously people understand that you don't have capital gains tax and stuff like that, but a lot of people don't actually know. You've actually got to pay stamp duty on that as well. So there's a lot of things that you've got to be aware of changing from one position to the next. Just quickly on that one, Steve, what's some of the biggest traps that you've seen where people are restructuring, where they get caught out and things become massively more expensive than what they anticipated?
Well, God, there's a heap. One of them is not understanding that each state in Australia has different trust rules, right? Every state in Australia has a different trust regime. Every state in Australia has a different stamp duty regime. Every state in Australia has different regimes when it comes to investment around property, or around holding of shares in different structures. And people think that, okay, I've moved from Victoria and now I'm up here and this is happening and that's happening. But they don't realise that it's a different jurisdiction, right? And if you're running a business and you might have, say, work cover in Victoria, but you also need work cover in Queensland. You'll need a different insurance policy up here, compared to the one in Victoria. So that's why if you've got investments in Queensland and investments in, say, Victoria, it's actually better off to have them ring-fenced as different buckets, right? Because of the jurisdictional, the law and all that sort of stuff, it just makes it easier. You have your Queensland stuff tied up in a Queensland bucket and your Victorian stuff tied up in a Victorian bucket, because the laws will change different in each of those states. And unwinding that sort of stuff later on can be very expensive, especially if the laws go against you and the rules go against you.
I have to say I didn't plan on this one, and I'm going to take credit for it anyway. That is an absolute curler of a transition, because the next topic, the second one we're planning to talk about, is actually the taxation side of things. So I think it's really important. And again, this is where a really good accountant comes into play. You need to know what your tax systems is, where you stand actually on the tax side of things. So again, I'm going to throw it to you, Steve. What's some of the biggest risks people face in the tax side of things that they don't do that they really need to be aware of when it comes to resetting up structures, trying to protect themselves, especially around the taxation department, and some of the things that the ATO can actually do to recoup the taxes that you screwed up on?
Yeah, so it's not so much. So the ATO is one animal, right? Mm-hmm. And that's more around income tax than anything else. Where I see the biggest stuff ups happening is at a state level. People not understanding that the states have taxes, they have excises. If you're deemed a foreign investor, and as an Australian, if you live overseas, you might have an Australian trust, but it's a foreign trustee, so it's an Australian-based foreign trust. You're a foreign investor, right? And different states will have different rules around what foreign investors can and can't invest in, and the different penalties and stuff they'll have. These become huge. The other one, as I said, is mixing titles and stamp duties and all this sort of stuff from different states. That can have a real big, because in Queensland we don't have a land tax as of yet. They are talking about it heavily, but New South Wales and Victoria have land taxes, right? So not understanding these bits and pieces. So, and I think for Victoria, even if you have, so if you're based in Victoria, resident in Victoria, and have property in Victoria, Queensland, and New South Wales, they are going to and can, under their legislation, assess the land tax on all your assets held Australia-wide. So you could end up having to pay tax on property that's not even there. But if it's structured in the right way, they'll never look at it and not realise that it's actually that's you that's owning it. And that's the biggest thing. The other thing is holding assets in your name. The amount of times that we see people that set up and structures or buy an asset, put it in their name, and then don't have a plan of how they're going to transfer it, right? And not setting up right from day one. And this is the big thing, is not setting it up right from day one.
So I don't know if this one's not fall under personal advice. Would you encourage people who are fresh to the investment cycle of things, whether it's property, shares, or whatever, to actually delay getting into the market to make sure they're set up properly? Because obviously setting up properly does cost money. Sometimes they sign slow down their ability to enter the market. Would you say, right, wait the 6 months, save up some extra money, set your structures up first, because in the long run, it's going to save you a heap of time and actual money?
That's a really good question. Now, it comes down to how much you're going to invest. All right. If you're just going to throw $1,000 on crypto or $1,000 on a couple of ETFs, I wouldn't worry about it. Just go do it. Right. Mm-hmm. If it was a couple of $100,000 or $1 million, yes, 100%. Make sure you're structured right. Now, also understand the complexities of do you set up a self-managed super fund versus an investment trust? I'm not a big fan of self-managed super, purely and simply because I think they're just cumbersome and the rules around them are a pain in the ass. I'd rather be in a job where I can dictate whether I pay myself super or not, and in some ways just pay myself extra and then put that aside into an investment trust, and then invest the money that way, or just go with a standard super fund and try and build your assets outside the super world. Okay. Because the limitations on super, say if you sell a business and you end up with, say a $5 million payout, well, you mightn't be able to get all that into super.
Right? I have to say, one of the things Labor's brought out lately is they've prorated a lot of the changes on taxation around superannuation. So things to take into account. Yeah, the super rate may be lower, but you pay tax putting it in. Whilst it's earning money in the super, you pay tax again. And then as you pull it out, you're also paying tax. So you're actually getting triple dipped on that one. So make sure, like self-managed super funds, they sound amazing. We're trying to sell our 2 investment properties up in Geraldton, which is north of Perth. And the guy who wants to buy them through his superannuation fund. And we've had to go to what looks like to be a 2-month settlement purely because of all the messing around. He's based in Queensland buying property in WA. So you got that problem. Plus the superannuation side of things as well is proving to be a lot more of a headache than what we originally thought. So just be aware there's always problems. And again, I can't harp on this enough. See a professional on these things because it clears a lot of the clutter out. It clears a lot of there's a lot of, and I hate using this term, misinformation. Don't talk to your mate over the water cooler for financial advice on things. Actually talk to a professional. Find out what's really going on and get yourself educated. I have to say, since working with GWC and doing all these things with them, I find the information I've learned invaluable. It's just, I cannot stress enough how important training yourself is. So obviously you guys have all come through the GWC logos, but if you do want to have a look at some of their courses, it's globalwealthclub.com.au. There's a whole heap of courses there if you want to learn on certain things. So what I'll do now is also jumping across now to the asset protection side of things, especially around safeguarding your assets. With what's going on, because I don't think people understand, we've got a majority for the lower house for Labor and a majority in the upper house for Labor as well. WA, we've also got that. So it's like a double whammy. So what that means, just quick history breakdown. Generally, the lower house makes laws. The upper house is sort of like the goalkeeper. They stop bad laws from coming through. So what's happened now, because Labor controls both, they go, you know what? Digital IDs, let's do it. They push it through. It's went straight through the lower house. It's gone straight through the upper house without debate. And that's the bit where there's no information, no checks and balances. So the laws are constantly changing. And this isn't the only thing that's happened. It's also happened in WA with a heap of stuff, changing electoral boundaries, especially with asset protection. How dangerous is it for people with assets when you have a government in this sort of authority level?
Extremely. So understanding, so just what we were saying before, right? Understanding what different jurisdictions do and what different jurisdictions can't do. Well, you've got to remember, in Australia, we're a federation of states, right? And this is where it actually annoys the shit out of me when people say, we should abolish the states. That just tells me how uneducated that individual is. So if you've ever said we should abolish the states, please take yourself outside, slap yourself fucking around, and then come back and join the conversation, because you obviously don't understand how Australia was formed and where the power actually lies. So the power in Australia lies with the states in the first instance, and there are some instances through the Constitution, especially through section, I think it's 109, that basically says if there's a contradiction in the legislation, the Commonwealth legislation will obey only if it's the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth. So, so we do have some weird and wonderful places that way. But there's also another section in the Constitution, I can't remember where it is, in the 60s, I think it is, that basically says that the states can give up their rights to certain issues to the Commonwealth, which has happened a lot around education and health, and that's purely because the federal government controls the money. And we've had a lot of lazy state premiers. But at the end of the day, the states basically control what's going on. And when it comes to asset protection, the number one vehicle that we use is a trust. And the trust is state-based legislation. But your corporate trustee is federal, because it's a corporation, and a corporation is governed at the federal level. So you're mixing two levels of jurisdiction, and that is why you need to understand trust laws in each individual state. They're fairly common because it's common law trust, but you do need to understand that the state can change laws around trusts as it wishes and when it wishes to. Right? It's not the federal government that's going to do that, right? And that's why I do like in Australia using trusts and using foundations, because trusts and foundations are pretty much a state-based entity, even though now with foundations are going to be registered through the ACNC. But if you use a trust document or association deed or something like that, it becomes a state-based entity. It's only when you use a corporation for a foundation that it becomes a federally governed jurisdiction. So just understanding those basic things. Doing cross-border property, like your mate that's buying, it's probably a Queensland-based self-managed super fund, because self-managed super funds are technically trusts, but these things are trusts that are administered by the feds. So he's got to deal with all the WA-based laws around property investment from self-managed super fund. I'm not sure about WA, but some states treat self-managed super funds based in another state as pretty much a foreign investor because it's foreign to their jurisdiction. You're not a WA person buying a WA asset. So you do have these intricacies, and you do need to understand what's going on with them. And this is where a good lawyer and accountant that is up with all this sort of stuff will know this and should be able to say, hang on a minute, well, let's have a look at the taxation implications, or let's look at the structure implications, because it might be just as easy to set up a WA trust for WA assets.
Yeah. The other thing that a lot of people don't take into account, especially interstate investments, especially if you're buying, say, an old house, large block of land, you plan to knock it down and build units on it. Different regions within a state, so different shires, different councils, each one of them has different approval processes, fees, charges, rates, deep sewerage. So again, going back to your comment about the states have all the power. So a lot of people say, oh, the council's got no control over me and all that sort of stuff. The states actually released or relinquished their authority to the local council in certain aspects. So the local councils do actually have a lot of authority because they're granted to them by the state. So that's another one that they really need to take into account.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what people don't understand. So councils come into existence by basically a grant from the states or a charter from the states to be a corporation to look after that area, originally for roads, rates and rubbish, the 3 R's, right? But it's morphed into the state has gone, oh, we'll give them planning, oh, we'll give them this, we'll give them that. And
you might take planning back. Yeah,
and the states do need to pare them back. Now, Tasmania did try that, and then it got all fucking ballsed up because politicians are useless, and they got pushed back from the bureaucracy. That's the other biggest thing that you've got to work out is the interpretation of laws and rules in different states are not necessarily, well, pretty much aren't up to the politicians. Once the politicians pass the law gets passed, it goes on to the governor, it gets approved, it gets assented, and then it becomes a law or a regulation in the state or federally. All of a sudden, what is really the driving factor now is the interpretation of that and the regulations that need to go with it by the bureaucracy. And that's where you can have the same law interpreted in different places, totally different because the bureaucrat reading it.
Yep. So I'm going to chuck a link into the chat for the people listening here. So I was actually going to bring this up earlier, but now it's just better. It's actually from the AusLII, what do they call it? Yeah, AusLII or whatever they call it. I personally like going through the actual West Australian or the federal act itself, but this is an education facility that will teach you about certain laws. It's actually Section 18 of the Interpretations Act. I think it's 2005 from memory. 1984 was the original one, and they keep doing updates. It gets to a point where even if they've passed a law, it's gone through the sanction, the Governor General signed it off, and it is absolute law. They can then refer back to the Interpretations Act to totally change the meaning of that law. And this is why, again, it is absolutely critical. Great accountants, spend the money on getting a good accountant, spend the money on getting a good lawyer, spend that bit of money to get yourself protected, because politics and laws, the way they word them, is utter bullshit. It is crazy. So it's just something, unless you've got the time to actually sit there. And the other bit is like, it'll say, oh, Section 1 of this law refers to this law, that refers to this law, which refers to this law, which actually talks about this one, which has nothing to do with this, but has everything to do with this. And unless you've got the time to sit down and read absolutely every single piece of legislation around what you're trying to do, you're still going to miss things. So I can't stress enough how important it is to actually use people who know what they're talking about. So yeah, when I first learned about the Interpretations Act, I thought, what a crock of shit. So
Yeah, and uh, you're about 80% right with the Interpretations Act. The Interpretations Act does have limitations around it, but a lot of it's to do with clarifying language more than it is clarifying intent, right? The only people that can change the intent, theoretically, change the intent of a law is the lawmakers themselves. But the only body outside of that can change the intent of a law and create a precedent is either the High Court or the Supreme Courts in the jurisdiction that's there.
So it's,
but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah,
There's
Section 19 is another doozy.
99% aware of it.
Yeah. There's this one section, 19.2H. They're talking about external materials that can be used to determine a case. Any relevant material in any official record of proceedings in either House of Parliament. So if someone says something on the floor of Parliament that can be used, whether it's in a debate, putting something forward, or any part of it, even if they're just making a statement about something, they can actually then use that to make a ruling in one of the other courts. So it's just too hard basket. Like I said, instead of sitting there trying to learn all this sort of stuff, sometimes it is actually a bit more cost effective to pay the money to get a professional look at it and give you the correct ruling on it. Because that's what they're there for. They're there to protect you, to keep you safe. So yeah, I always found the Interpretations Act one of the most craziest parts of legislation. So what I'd like to do here also, for the people that are listening in, if there's something around asset protection or something that they've got questions for, please don't hesitate to send them through. We love questions. We love making sure you guys don't get yourself into too much trouble. And just remember, we can't give personal advice on this one. So if you do have something of a personal nature, we may not be able to give you the full answer, but we'll be able to direct you in where to get the answers that you're seeking. So again, it might also be a case of just going, oh, we've got a great course on that. This is where it is on the website as well. Because Warren's been at this for a long time. Stephen's been doing this for a long time. The amount of videos that I've edited for you guys is insane. So make sure you do look at the past videos as well. There's some absolute gold mines out there. So please make sure you do get yourself familiar with the website as well. Did I leave anything out there, Stephen?
No, I think you got everything.
So yeah, what I'd like also to do is, when it comes to asset protection, what are three things? What's your number one thing that you do, that you look for to try and, especially when you're looking at a totally new industry, what's the number one thing that you look for to when it comes to asset protection?
That's a really good question.
And I put you on the spot too.
Yeah, so because a lot of it comes down to what you're trying to achieve, right, for asset protection. Now, are you trying to protect assets for multi-generational wealth, or are you trying to protect assets from a legal lawsuit because you're in a highly vulnerable occupation? Are you trying to protect assets from a potential marriage breakdown, from a business partner? It comes down to really what you're trying to achieve. But let's just say that it's a stock standard. You're trying to create asset protection for wealth protection and wealth accumulation. The number one thing there is the vehicle that you're using going to fit the purpose that you're wanting to do? So, for instance, if you want to create wealth that's going to last 10 generations, a trust mightn't be the right vehicle, because a trust in most states is only for 99 years. Queensland and New South Wales now are 125, and I think WA is going to 125 as well. But that's not perpetual. That's only 5 generations. Where a foundation, whether it's a private interest foundation or an auxiliary foundation, whatever it is, that has an unlimited life. Right. So making sure that you're choosing the right vehicle for what you're trying to do. Now, if it's you're just going to pass it on to your kids, one generation, a trust is probably the easiest thing to do, and it may work out the right vehicle. If it's just you and on your death, everything's going to get, go to a charity or go to a number of charities. It may be just a simple proprietary limited company with 3 directors and all that. So it comes down to really what are you trying to achieve, why you're trying to protect it, and then also the asset base. How much is it? Because it mightn't be just one structure, it might be 3 or 4, or it might be 3 or 4 different types, right, that have to be taken into account. So it does come down to a lot of questions that you need to do beforehand, and just running into doing something because everyone else is doing it may not be the right thing for you.
Okay. So when you're first looking at setting up these trusts, and you listed it perfectly just there, you've got to know where you are to start with. So what are the key things for your own personal position? So let's run a scenario. You're looking to buy your first investment property. You're setting up a trust. You want it for a generational. You want to be able to hand the property over from family member to family member, like each year, potentially develop it in, say, 20, 30 years' time. So what sort of information would you need to know before even looking at what structure is best suited for you? So obviously, who's involved, how much the asset's going to be worth, what the future plan for that asset is, what other things do you really need to take into account when trying to determine where you want to be and what sort of setup would be best for you? Like, I'm just trying to think, what's the best way to make this as easy as possible for the accountant moving forward, or the lawyer, whoever's setting it up for you?
Sorry, I'm just I've got 2 things going here at once. So basically, what you want to make sure is in that instance, you want to make sure you got a robust trustee of a trust. That the trust, and I see this quite often, is people they make themselves trust individuals as trustees. Well, you're still putting yourself at risk, right? Because they can come after the trustee directly, right? The other thing that that they do that you need to do is, say, use a corporate trustee. You need to make sure that you have a way that the directors of the corporate trustee can be transferred, right? So you need to make sure that your constitution and all that sort of stuff is right. Not necessarily just using the replaceable rules of a normal company, but actually drafting a constitution that works for what you want, right? Not what they want. And then using your objectives of the foundation, what you're trying to achieve, having all that encumbered, and then having a will that lines up with that, right? This is one of the biggest things that we also see is people don't have wills that line up with the objectives of their trust, right? And if, like here in Australia, you don't have to quite worry about it, but if you've got assets overseas and your wills don't line up with what the objective of your company or the objective of whatever you're doing is, you can end up in probate and in a whole heap of mess, right? So what you don't want to do is have your story out of the line from a legal sense. That's probably one of the biggest things. The other thing is you went to a property seminar, someone sold you the idea of some fucking trust that sounds so good, on paper, but it's a bag of shit because it doesn't actually work. There's only 2 types of trusts, right? Everyone says, oh, there's fucking testimony, there's this, there's that. That's fucking bullshit, right? There's 2 types of trust. There's a discretionary trust, right? and then there's a unit trust in their physical structure. Now, when it comes to the trust, how the trust operates, that's when you can then modify bits and pieces. You know, you can have one that's family because the beneficiaries are more going to be family. You can have one that's charitable because the beneficiaries are more charitable, and the operations, what the trustee can and can't do, may be done. You get trusts that are appointed by a court. You get trusts that you get all these terms. Oh, is it an irrevocable trust or a revocable trust? That comes down to what the rules of the trustee are, right? And how you set that up. There is so much bullshit out there from spruikers on this that make trusts, and that sounds so fucking complicated that it's not, right? It's pretty much, do you want a discretionary trust or a unit trust? You wouldn't use a unit trust for holding assets. You'd use some form of discretionary trust. The other thing is looking at something and saying, does a bucket company work for me as one of my beneficiaries, right? Because if you use a bucket company, you can limit some of your tax to 30 cents on the dollar. So if all your beneficiaries are high income earners, and you're going to get individually taxed at 48 cents, you might be better off just using a bucket company. Now, the other thing is you might have a trust that owns a company, and the company owns the property. If it's a commercial property, for instance, that might be the way to do it, right? Is own it that way, or have a discretionary trust hold units in a unit trust, right? For instance. So you just, a bit of just planning and just working out what you want before you do anything, it goes a long way to be really clear on why you're doing it, and not just setting it up because someone on a webinar said it was the best thing to do.
So talking about webinars and events and people spruiking fairy dust and all that sort of stuff, I have to say I've got an email here. Well, it's not an email, it's a document. So from my understanding, GWC is actually holding a Secure Your Wealth one-day event. From what I know, it's the 6th of April 2024. So if Warren's still around, I'll just get him to double check, make sure that's still going ahead. Again, the
absolutely is going ahead.
It's going ahead. So tickets. What's the link on this? Secureyourwealth.com.au. Is that link still valid, Warren?
I hope so.
Anyway, what I'll do, I'll just copy and chuck it into the chat for everyone. So make sure you grab your tickets because Warren will be there. Obviously, Stephen will be there in spirit.
If Stephen's there, no, it'll be myself and Stephen, Andrew, and Daryl.
I'll be there. I'm the hostess with the mostest.
You're the hostess with the mostest, with the biggest beard out of all of us. Yeah. So make sure you go there because I'm actually thinking I'm supposed to be busy that day. I think I'm going to be cancelling on the wife and actually going to this event instead. So do book your tickets early because when Warren starts going on his rants and the speeches and all that, they're brilliant. Like, I cannot stress enough how great of a speaker he is. So we do have a question come in from Greg J. I'm not sure how much of this you guys can answer because there's a bit of personal stuff in there, but we'll see. And obviously, if Stephen and Warren, if you can't answer it, if it's too personal, you know that side of things better than me. Just say if you can't, but you can get information wherever. From Greg, I have a residential unit held in a company as a sole director. I want to transfer it to a trust. I could even make the company a trustee if it helped the cause. Is there a way this can be done without incurring stamp duty on market value or capital gains tax? So let's break this one down. The first thing is he's the sole director of the company. He wants to transfer it into a trust. So my next question would be, why would he be transferring it to a trust? What's the purpose of the trust? And is there a way he can do this without incurring stamp duty on market value or capital gains? So what's your thoughts? Who wants to take this one first?
Where you go, Warren?
Stephen, I was going to expect you to answer that one, mate.
I can have a crack, but the information will be right.
Ask the question again. I just want to get it clear in my head. Ask it again.
Yeah, run the question.
Okay, so I have a residential unit held in a company as a sole director. So it's a residential unit held by a company with a sole director.
Yeah.
I want to transfer it into a trust. I could even make the company a trustee if it would help the cause. Is there a way this can be done without incurring stamp duty on market value or capital gains tax?
Oh, that's kind of like the sort of thing you'd normally be getting quoted by a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warren, I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
My initial gut feeling is transferring it would be a pain in the ass. I would transfer the shares of the company to a trust and go from there.
I don't think you can. I mean, my understanding is that you can't. You know, stamp duty is very hard to avoid in capital gains in most situations when it comes to property. But the only way you can do it is if you transfer into a foundation. That's my understanding.
Oh yeah, the foundation. But and see, we also need to know what state this is in.
How long you've held it?
How long you've held it. Now I know in Queensland, if you are transferring it and it's the same owners, say for instance you did transfer it into a trust and the trustee and the beneficiary were the same people, you could possibly you'd need a lot of lawyer here. You possibly may get around stamp duty. It's probably a 90% that you won't because the governments are broke. But because it could be deemed as the shares of the company could be deemed as a what do they call it, Warren? A major change of ownership, significant change of ownership.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So normally, so here's the thing for you people. So when you see properties that come on the market and it's, oh, they haven't been sold in the last 20 years or haven't been sold in 6 generations, blah, blah, blah. 9 times out of 10, that's because they've been held in what's called a double company structure, right? So the property is held by a company, that company is held by another company, and it's the top company that gets sold. Right?
So selling a portfolio.
So up until recently, that didn't trigger stamp duty.
So just so I'm clear on that one, so let's say you've got, say, 10 properties. All of these properties have their own entity that owns them. So let's say it's 123 Smith Street, it's one entity, 567 Smith is another one. So there's all these for asset protection. And then there's a company that owns all of those companies that own the property. So it's sort of like a multiple tiered system.
Yeah.
So it's more of a portfolio than anything else. So you effectively, when you sell that top company, you're selling all the properties that.
No. Each property has a company which has another company.
Oh, okay, I've got you. Yeah. So then, yeah.
Now,
okay.
Up until recently, in Australia, that wouldn't trigger stamp duty, but now they are looking at it. Overseas, that's the way we set properties up for billionaires and people with multiple properties all the time, because then what they do is they just sell the company at the top, and you put notes, and you might have a bank loan at the thing, but the bank loan remains with the company. So,
okay.
And most of these companies, they actually have nominee directors, and the nominee directors are normally regulated individuals. So they're regulated under the trust laws of countries. So here's an interesting tip for most people. Australia is one of the only countries in the world that allows a corporate trustee where the corporate trustee doesn't have to be regulated as a trustee.
Well, considering how regulated Australia is, I find that quite amazing.
Me too. So when people have trouble opening bank accounts or opening statutory accounts overseas using an Australian trust with a corporate trustee, 9 times out of 10 the banks and that won't do it because they're looking for a regulated trustee.
Okay, that's interesting. That explains a lot of hassles we had with ours when we first set up. We had to go bank shopping because it was just next to impossible to get them to actually open bank accounts for us.
Yeah.
So what I might do, because 22 past 6 in WA, I might throw it to yourself, Steve, and Warren for last thoughts on this one. And just again, for the ladies and gentlemen who are watching, please make sure you grab your tickets out secureyourwealth.com.au for the event on the 6th of April. It's going to be an absolute doozy, and I'm super excited about seeing it with you guys. So let's throw it to Warren first. Last notes before we wrap up.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, this event that we're doing next month is all about protecting your wealth. So what we've been doing at Global Wealth Club is a very thematic approach this year where we decided to really educate and walk people through a journey. So like we started off in January with how to prosper in times of chaos. And that was all about how do you put some money in your pocket? Then, of course, February was all about helping women get empowered as a fast growing area where women are starting to seek more empowerment. There's been more problems and gender inequalities. So it was all about that. This month and next month is all about protecting your wealth, like keeping what you've made, because it's so important. Like there's nothing more demoralizing than to lose what's taken. So this month's and next month's all about protecting your wealth from being seized. So we've got actually 2 events next month. We've got the 6th of April, another on the 20th of April. And yeah, we're going to be covering everything around wealth, sovereignty. You're going to hear Stephen on second passport citizenships. You're going to be hearing me. We're going to be getting a guy called Virgil and Silver Bullion teaching on wealth and protection and gold and why precious metals is going up so much. And then, of course, you know, yours truly, I'll be speaking on foundations, on structures, just basically how to get yourself out of the matrix and keep your wealth safe, because ultimately that's very important. And then, of course, I think May, we're going to be starting a whole journey about becoming sovereign, like finding your sovereign purpose. So we've got a whole thematic approach happening. So you definitely want to come to this event because I've been reading everywhere. I'm sure many of you have seen just how much, you know, Bank West shutting its branches. I mean, governments are definitely moving towards cashless. The New World Order is tightening its screws. The spider's web is growing. And there's no question that the vulnerability is increasing. So one of the things that you'll never find a high net worth person, and I know Stephen would attest to this one, I've never met one who doesn't pretty much spend insane amounts of their wealth, in fact, minimum 5%, in just keeping their wealth, protecting it. There was an article even 8 years ago in the Sydney Morning Herald by a journalist about how the 56 richest Australians, I think 2 paid tax, but all of them spent over $1 million in managing, in getting expert advice and mastering their finances and their protecting their wealth. So yeah, it's a bit like when you're doing gym and doing deadlifting, you got to be able to protect your body. So that's what next month's going to be all about. And that was why today was to give you a bit of a sneak preview. And next Wednesday, we'll be doing a finale before the 6th. But yeah, come along. I know we say this, but Stephen will probably echo the same thing as me. But the time you should have done this was yesterday. If you haven't, at least it's better to start now than not do it at all and wake up one day and be caught out and there's not much you can do. So the first 3 months of the year, we've been very much encouraging. This one's a little bit more like the importance of protecting your wealth and getting everything secured, well structured. I mean, it's nothing when the shit hits the fan, you'll sit there wishing you'd done it. And that's kind of my little rant on that sort of stuff. So companies, trusts, all these structures can literally, second passports, all these kind of things can save your bacon. And not more than that, they can just put more money in your pocket. So rather than you giving it all away to the government, and as Kerry Packer once said, you don't want to be giving any unwanted donations, you know, basically as a voluntary gift. And if you do, well, hey, send them my way. Voluntary, you're better off to be putting the money in your pocket where it rightfully belongs. That's kind of always been one of my little favorite mantras. And good planning and good structuring, and you can do that, very much so. So yeah, look forward to seeing you all at the event. So if you're coming, just raise your hand or type a Y, just so we know who's coming. I'm coming, I think.
I'm glad you are coming. It'd be a boring show if you guys didn't rock up. So
yeah, I know. I think we'll be there. We'll see what's happening.
So yeah, so just while we wait for those wires to come through, there is another option on there. I was just having a look at the link then. I've noticed here you've also got your VIP tickets, which are only $19.95, which also gives you a workbook to actually start getting yourself the planning and getting ready and all that sort of stuff. So head over to that link I put in the chat, so secureyourwealth.com.au. Now, Steve, final thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, guys, look, if you've got structures in place and that sort of stuff and you haven't reviewed them in a few years, please have a look at them. Please go and do a review and do it tomorrow. If you're contemplating setting up structures, have a think about what you're trying to achieve, and think outside the square as well. Like for instance, if you don't have children and you don't have anyone to leave stuff to, maybe a trust isn't what you need. Maybe it's a foundation, right? And that's because then your assets can go where you want them to go, not where the government wants them to go on your passing. One of the other things I'll say about structures and asset protection is don't overlook insurance. One of the number one things, especially in Australia, is most Australians are very, very underinsured, right? And there is ways out there where you can make insurance actually an asset. So there's different types of insurance that you can access, and they're not regularly touted, but they're definitely products out there that you can access. And some of them aren't in Australia. Some of them you've got to go overseas. For instance, I was on a call earlier tonight with one of my insurance guys that I use quite regularly, and he's got a new whole of life investment product, which were big in Australia before superannuation. And these products you can actually park cash in them and get an annuity like a superannuation fund and life insurance and all that sort of stuff when it comes to retirement. So there is other things to look at, but don't forget insurance and come to the event.
There's so many different options out there. Like the more I talk around with you guys, Shaq's another one, Derek is another one. Like the level of knowledge that between the four of you that you have, and now just double checking Virgil, that's from the guy from Singapore, isn't it? Warren?
Which is
Yes, it is. I literally have to go off in a minute. I have another thing to go to.
So these guys, their knowledge is insane. And if you do want more information before the event, I've just chucked into the chat the support@globalwealthclub.com email address. So do send out an email. And I can't remember, Warren, you still doing one-on-one consultations to point people in the right direction?
We do. Steve and I run Accelerate where we do that. So yes, we have an automated education model, and it's one option for those who just want to do it all one-on-one and come to our advanced stuff, or if you want some one-on-one personalized plan, we've got that option as well.
Yep. So just send an email through to the support email address, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction to what would best suit your budget and needs. So I think that's time to wrap this one up, gentlemen and ladies and gents listening online. So this has been the Global Wealth. Sorry, I went into radio talk. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, but yeah. So yeah, if you do have questions, make sure you send it through to the support email address, and I think we wrap this one up here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Travis, and thank you, Stephen.